Today we are discussing with Reya and Gelato. Reya is a layer 2 and Gelato is a roll-up service provider that are building together to bring the biggest Arbitrum orbit chain. So yeah, with us we have Hilman Hort, he's the Gelato's founder, and Simon Jones, founder and CEO of Reya Network. So let's give them a big applause to them.
All right. Obviously, super excited to be here talking to you all about the story of Reya Network, which is the biggest Arbitrum orbit chain. Just very briefly, so you know who's talking to you, I'm Simon. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Reya Labs, the creators of Reya Network.
Yeah, I'm Hilma, the founder of Gelato.
So before I get into what it is that Reya Network does, I actually want to take a massive step back and talk about why Reya Network is important in the first place. And to do this, I actually think it's kind of helpful for us to address a bit of an elephant in the room at times, which is that at times our industry is deliberately not serious. Like, we call ourselves degenerates. In fact, this entire statement reminded me of this Succession meme, for anyone who gets the reference. But the point here is that this is just us having fun, and frankly, it's a part of the industry that I actually love. You know, you can bring us to Brussels, and we somehow still manage to enjoy it. But behind that layer of fun, the industry, and I think DeFi in particular, has got a very serious mission, where, for me, DeFi is about giving people a choice, where, as we all know, that choice is between keeping your money in the existing financial system, which is massively opaque, it is centralized, it has huge capacity for incentive misalignment, or what we've actually created as an industry is we created a new system where you can move your money across, and it is, in many respects, the polar opposite of the system that has existed in the past. Instead of it being opaque, it is transparent. Instead of it being centrally managed, it is decentralized and managed by the people that use it. Instead of it having huge capacity for incentive misalignment, it's actually programmatic and immutable in nature. Now, obviously we all know this, we exist in the industry, we have already created it and actually made this choice. The point that I want to make here is, I want every single person in the world to be able to make this choice. I want DeFi to actually be able to work for billions of people. And to do that, we need DeFi to be able to scale. And it's from that backdrop that we created Reya Network, where Reya Network is specifically looking to help optimize for DeFi scaling. And that's a pretty big problem space. So what we did in the very first instance is we actually shrunk that problem down to be to a deliberate niche, which is still a pretty big niche, which is trading. So as of today, Reya Network is a trading optimized L2. And I just want to pause here just for a second as a bit of a side note. So Reya, spelled R-H-E-A, is the mother of Zeus, which explains the branding. I haven't just put a random Greek Chad on the back of a slide.
I thought that's you. So,
Anyway, so what does trading optimized mean? It basically means that we want to focus on the biggest blockers to helping DEXs scale. And that really breaks down into two main things. The first is performance. It's pretty obvious that you need to have more performant blockchains to be able to facilitate large amounts of trading. And with the help of the Arbitrum Orbit tech stack, we're actually able to make Reya Network super, super fast. We can achieve 100 millisecond block times and over 30,000 transactions per second, which, when you compare that to some projects getting a lot of hype, so Monad and Say, just as examples, where they're able to achieve 10,000 transactions per second and 16,000 transactions per second. granted, Reya Network's an L2, not an L1, but from a utility to users point of view, we're actually around 2 to 3 times more performant. But performance is one thing. The thing that makes Reya Network completely unique is that we have figured out how to embed a liquidity mechanism into the network itself. And at a practical level, the way that this works is that users stake capital into the network. That then gets passed through a passive LP pool mechanism and gets made available as liquidity for any of the DEXs building on top of the network. And the impact of that is basically twofold. First of all, if you're a DEX team, you can tap into that liquidity just on day one, just by deploying on the network, which in itself actually addresses the number one reason why DEXs fail, which is because they can't build the liquidity in order to reach escape velocity. But then number two, and where this gets super cool, is because the liquidity is actually at the network level, unlike with a generalizable L2, where a new DEX team deploys and it fragments the liquidity, actually when a team deploys a DEX on Reya Network, it doesn't fragment the liquidity at all. The liquidity remains in a giant pool that exists at the network level. And the impact of this is clearly you have deeper markets for all of the DEXs. They're able to facilitate better trading conditions. That's able to facilitate kind of more trading volume, generate more fees, and ultimately reach escape velocity for their project. And it's because of this that whilst we talk about Reya Network being a trading optimized network, we also talk about it as being the first of its kind liquidity network as well. Building all of this is obviously quite complicated. There's a lot of stuff here that we needed to figure out in order to bring Reya to live. And one of the decisions that we made pretty early on is that we didn't want to do this all on our own. We actually wanted to work with partners to help bring the project to life. Clearly, I'm stood here because we chose to work with Arbitrum Orbit. But just to talk through that decision-making process a little bit, with the help of the Gelato team, we actually spun up a bunch of different test nets with different tech stacks. So Arbitrum Orbit, OP, some of the ZK guys. And what we then did is we deployed our liquidity mechanism onto it. We ran a whole load of tests. And off the back of those tests and, frankly, like other diligence, we concluded that Arbitrum Orbit was the right tech stack both for now and also for the future as well. And that predominantly broke down into 3 main reasons. The first, obviously, the Arbitrum tech stack, it's robust and proven to work at scale, right? Like, it's by far the biggest L2. It's facilitated billions of transactions. I think it's at 17 billion in terms of TVL. For us, where we're actually looking to layer in a bunch of other new stuff to the network itself, just having the confidence that we're not then layering in something that could also not work, you know, that is worth its weight in gold. So that was immensely important for us. The second is actually the customizability of the Arbitrum Orbit stack. So I think there's about 30 different parameters that you can change. To give some good examples of that, the 100 millisecond block times, we could change that. So we could take something that's generalizable, and we could make it more specific to our use case and the problems that we want to solve for our users. We also maxed out kind of the units of gas, which enables us to hit 30,000 TPS. You can do other things like choose your own gas token. There's a bunch of things that you can do, but the customizability of it is one of the key things for us that enabled us to create a trading optimized network. And then the final point, and this is a little bit of a softer point, but it's also equally important, is the immense support structure that exists around the Arbitrum community. So there's obviously a bunch of founders in the space, teams like Gelato. There's a bunch of DeFi teams that have already kind of moved across from Arbitrum 1 to Reya Network, and there's a bunch of teams actively doing that today as well. But alongside that, we spent some time with the Off-Chain Labs team looking at some of the ideas they had for forward-looking pieces they wanted to propose to governance. And I think a really good example of that, which has recently gone through, is Stylus, where I'm super bullish on what that could enable. At the time we made the decision, it gave us confidence that Arbitrum Orbit was going to be right for us now, but also in the future. And I guess talking about support structures is a good handoff to Hilmar.
Thanks, Simon. So Simon talked about that we span up a bunch of test nets for Reya, and to help them make a decision on what tech stack is actually the best one for them to utilize our Reya network. And this really underlines like one of the core hypotheses that we had quite early on at Gelato, which is that devs just don't need yet another blockchain, right? You don't want to build just, hey, the 100th L2, which is exactly the same as everyone else's, but what you really need is you need an integrated solution for your specific use case or problem set that you want to have. And in case of Reya, of course, is building liquidity and making the best possible place or ecosystem for, at the beginning, trading, and then in general, DeFi. And this is what we at Gelato really focus on solving for customers like Reya. We call ourselves the verifiable cloud. Our platform, what it consists of, is 3 different layers. First, we have a rollup as a service layer, which allows you to, as Simon said, spin up chains with a click, be it Arbitrum Orbit or P-Stack, and whatever you want to try. You can select different sort of DA layers. You can select between shared sequencing, decentralized sequencing, centralized sequencing, whatever sort of fits your needs. And then on top of that, we realized that the chain itself is really just one piece of the puzzle. You need a comprehensive suite of services around that to actually make the use cases you want to build achievable. And so what we have at Gelato, what we built over the years, is really a layer of middleware services that allow you to automate transactions on chain, push Oracle data on chain, create random verifiable randomness, abstract gas away, so all the tools you really need in order to build, let's say, a SEX-like trading experience, so that we provide out of the box in a click for you to leverage on your chain for any of the applications that build on there. And beyond that, we also have a bunch of third-party tools, multi-stakes indexes and stuff that you get also in a click available on your chain. So you got the perfect environment for you to tailor the infrastructure exactly to your use case. And some interesting stats around that. We actually, if we look at all the chains that are deployed on Gelato, 80% of them are actually using the Arbitrum Orbit stack. I think this is testament to the great technology that the team here at Arbitrum has built over the years. And also interesting, 75% actually use data availability committees for the data. Which means that Arbitrum especially is used a lot for high-performance, low-cost use cases, right? And if we're talking about trading, of course, you want to trade. You want people to be able to facilitate millions of transactions. And if you still post all of that as blob data to Ethereum, it just becomes prohibitively expensive. So a lot of them actually opt in for DAC, but we also, of course, offer other sort of services, other DA solutions. 90%, for example, of the Reya transactions that are happening are actually originating from Gelato services. Let's say on Reya Dex, which is an application on Reya network, all the transactions are gasless, so users don't even have to have ETH in their wallet anymore. All the Oracle data are being pushed in every 5 seconds. And so you see that these services become more and more needed and more important on these very sort of sophisticated, tailor-made chains. And then just like from a cost perspective, if you think about it, the chains are getting more and more cost effective, and 70% of the costs of spinning up your chain is actually all the tooling around it that you need. And what we want to do is we really want to bring that cost down to make it even more democratized, even more accessible for every application to deploy their chain. Because we believe in what Vitalik said, L2s are like verifiable servers, and we believe that at some point every application in the world will just spin up a server like you do right now on Google Cloud or AWS, just it's a verifiable server that is interconnected with a lot of other servers. This is just like some examples of chains that have launched. Planas, which is a gaming chain on Arbitrum Orbit, which is one of the biggest in terms of number of transactions being facilitated right now. You have AI-powered gaming chains, reward asset chains. Everclear is like a clearinghouse, or like a ZK privacy layer from Aleph0, also built on Arbitrum Orbit. So there are a bunch of really high-profile projects building on Gelato and Arbitrum Orbit that are right now sort of being launched. And what I always like to do is I always like to go into a bit of a detail of how like a chain actually looks like if you really map it out from an infrastructure perspective. If you want to, let's say, build what Reya does, so like the optimized trading layer 2. And there are several components that you need for this to happen. Of course, you need like the chain, Arbitrum Orbit, data availability, RPC nodes. But what you need as well, especially for DeFi, is of course Oracle data. In this case, Reya Network opted in for Redstone. Redstone price feeds are pool-based oracles. They're actually pushed to the chain every 5 seconds via Gelato Web3 functions, which is a service that we provide. As I mentioned, every transaction on the Reya DEX is fully gasless, which is done by our Gelato Relay service. And then very important for Reya was enabling people to easily bridge in liquidity, because it's a liquidity network, right? They need to amass liquidity. But we all know that a bunch of liquidity actually sits on centralized exchanges, on Arbitrum, on Base, on non-Ethereum L2s. And what an Ethereum L2, of course, gives you is a canonical bridge from Ethereum. And so they needed third-party bridges to actually bridge in funds in a more sort of user-friendly way without having to touch Ethereum from, let's say, Base, Arbitrum, or centralized exchanges directly. And so Socket was the sort of primary choice here as a partner to achieve this. And I think actually like 98% or 99% of all the liquidity comes via Socket on Reya Network, which is an interesting fact.
In fact, on that fact, just a good data point on this is, so I think when Blast launched, all you could do is bridge directly from Ethereum. When we launched, you could bridge from multiple chains. About 60% of all the TVL that ended up on Reya Network came directly from Arbitrum. Yeah. It didn't come from Ethereum mainnet.
Even though Reya is an L2 on Ethereum, which is the interesting part. And just as a so we of course have like chains launching like every day, every week on Gelato, and so these are some of the trends that we are really seeing. I think the first one aligns quite well with what Vitalik said. I think that the days of like just the next general purpose L2s are sort of over. I think you can't really create like except if you have like a great community like centralized exchanges such as Coinbase and Base, it's very hard to really bootstrap that from scratch again. And so we see purpose-specific chains that are launching. Reya being an example of like highly specialized for trading, DeFi, amassing liquidity. For example, we have one of our customers that just recently launched a chain is Fox News. They're building which is called Verify, which is a chain that verifies content published by publishers such as the New York Times or Fox News, pushes hashes of that content on chain that people can verify to make sure they are not reading fake news or AI-generated content. Everclear is also an Arbitrum Orbit chain that handles optimizing net in and outflows of bridging volumes between different chains to make interoperability more efficient. And so this is really a clear trend that we are seeing, these verifiable servers that solve a particular niche or particular use case. Then chain abstraction, I think, is a big one. 90% actually of the chains that we launch all abstract gas away from users, or the applications are trying to abstract gas away from users, which is one key component of chain abstraction. So we believe that users at some point won't, like, there are chains, of course, but they won't maybe know what chains this application is on that they're supporting. It's more like a developer decision to understand which chain you're deploying your application on. And then we see the emergence of clusters coming around. And I think we saw with Arbitrum 1 being the first one where like L3s have been built on top. Now we have Base, where we have a bunch of L3s so like popping up. And we believe that there will be more of these clusters forming over time, where you have more L2s that are interconnected, interoperable, and then also having a cluster of L3s on top. And why? Because settlement on Ethereum is very expensive still. Like, we have L2s that are actually paying a ton of money to Ethereum, not only for plot data, but for settlement as well. And so if you really want to achieve high throughput, very, very low cost, then like L3s are right now a very interesting way of achieving this, also tapping into liquidity of the L2. And yeah, with that, back to you, Simon. Yeah,
so the deal is that Hilmar gives you the details, and I actually just end up staying quite macro. And to start wrapping up, honestly, I think we have done a phenomenal job of getting DeFi to the place that we've got it to today. What I'm really excited about and what we're committed to keep doing at Reya is to create a network that helps DeFi scale and helps DeFi serve billions of people. To do that, obviously, we need to expand from the trading niche that we've been focused on so far. So that liquidity mechanism that I talked about, it will be expanded so that it can work in a more generalizable format for more DeFi applications. Alongside that, picking up on some of the things that Hilmar's teed up, we're also going to be expanding the ways in which teams can actually deploy on that liquidity infrastructure that we've created. And without giving too much away, because there are announcements that are coming up in the not too distant future, that will be done in a way that facilitates infinite scalability. To wrap up, if you have any questions off the back of this talk, please feel free to reach out. Hilmar and I, we're going to be hanging around the conference the rest of the day. And in the meantime, thank you for having us and enjoy the rest of Arbitrum Day.
Thank you.